Today's daf we're going to be learning is Nedarim daf Kaftet. Today's daf is sponsored by Debbie Asham Weiss from New York City and Racheli Weiss from Givat Shmuel in loving memory of Sarah Yehudit Sharf Aleh Shalom on her first year at Tzeit. She left the world too early. Her abounding love and commitment to Judaism and Israel left a lasting mark on many. Okay, we're going to get started by a quick review of the Mishna that we started at the bottom of Kaftet Amud Aleph. So the Mishna had said, we'll do a quick review of the Mishna, then we'll do a quick review of the two explanations of the second part of the Mishna, Ulla and Bar Pada, and then we're going to start on our questions against their opinions. So the Mishna had said the first part, which we're not going to deal with, but I'll just review anyway, the sapling, everything on the sapling will be a korban, which basically we understood to mean it will be sanctified. By the way, there were two interpretations we said there, which is korban could mean a language of a neder, or korban could mean a language of, in this case, hekdesh, which is the way we really understood it. According to those who think that it actually means a neder, then why are these sanctified and why do they need pidyon? So we're going to get later on to have an opinion of Rabbi Meir that if you make something a neder against something, then it actually has it's hekdesh. It's basically sanctified. That's a whole thing that maybe you'd say this Mishnah goes according to that opinion. We'll get to that in about a week's time. Okay. So the Mishnah said, so these will be sanctified if they are not cut. And the idea here is that you assume some terrible thing is about to happen, some natural disaster or some fire, and you assume it's gone, and you basically say, well, if I'm saved from this, then I'm going to sanctify this to God, okay, to the temple. So if these are not destroyed, they'll be sanctified, and we view it as, we interpret it as that way, rather than saying that you're just trying to say, I'm so sure they're going to be destroyed, and I really didn't mean what I said, and that's what the Mishnah is coming to teach you. To which they say, instead of saying they're sanctified, they use this language, yesh lahem pidyon, they can be redeemed. Gemara had asked, why did it not just say they're sanctified, which would have equaled and they can be redeemed, because any sanctified item that you sanctify its value gets redeemed, which is what you did here. Well, the reason why they said yesh lahem pidyon was to compare it or contrast it to the next case. If you give it a time frame, okay, in this case, it's dependent on an action, but an action will happen at some point in time. These will be sanctified until such point as something happens, either niktzitzu, they're cut, or talitzo korban acheti saref. This talit will be a korban until such point that it gets burned. Then it will no longer be a korban. Ein lehem pidyon. So what does it mean? Ein lehem pidyon. They can never be redeemed. To which the Gemara had asked, and now I'm jumping to 4 lines at the bottom from the bottom of Kaf Chet Amud Bet. Ula olam, what, they can never be redeemed? So we're going to have 2 explanations. Both really address the fact. So the first interpretation, Amar Bar Pada, pida'an chozrot bekodshot, pida'an chozrot bekodshot ad shikatzitzu. Ein lehem pidyon means you can redeem them, but as soon as you redeem them, which generally means that they're going to become chulin, so long as they're still on the tree, every time you redeem them, the sanctity comes right back because they're still at that point before they're cut. So basically, you're going to keep redeeming them, and then you'll give that money to the temple, but then they'll already automatically, a second later, become sanctified again. So Elam Pidyon means really, Pidyon doesn't really work for them to remove the sanctity. That's all until such point as they get cut. Once they're cut, Niktzitzu, according to Bar Pada, Podam Pamachat. Well, you have to redeem them because they still had sanctity before. So in order to move from sanctity to no sanctity, it's true that right now you said they won't be sanctified once they're cut, but you can't just get rid of sanctity that was on it from before unless you redeem them. So then, podim pamachat v'dayo, then you can redeem them once and then it's fine. Ula amal, and again, we said there were 2 interpretations, whether he disagrees with the first part or not. Let's just assume he only disagrees with the second part. Ula amal, kevan sheniktitzu shuv ein podam. What he wants to say, ein lehem pidyon, means, again, if he doesn't disagree with Bar Pada about the first part, then until the time ad shiktitzu ein lehem pidyon means it's not really very effective. Okay, can't remove the kedusha. But if you understand the second part, they don't need pidyon. Ein lehem pidyon means not that you can't redeem them. They don't even need pidyon. Once they're cut, since you said at a certain point, once they are cut, they're no longer sanctified, so they don't even need pidyon. The sanctity is gone, because you said the sanctity will be up until such point as they're attached. Once they're no longer attached to the ground, they're not sanctified. So you don't even need to undo the sanctity that was there from before. You already, from the beginning, you said this will be sanctified until such point. As soon as you get to that point, there's no sanctity. Well, Rav Hamnuna has a lot of issues with this. And he said not a lot of issues, but one big issue. He says to him, Amalei Rav Hamnuna, starting now at the top of Kaftet, sanctity is not the kind of thing that just disappears. You can't just go poof, no sanctity. No, it doesn't work that way. You need to remove it by redemption. So therefore, how on earth does this work? According to you, Ulla, it makes no sense. Bar Pada makes perfect sense. Until Shenitzitzu, so the sanctity is going to keep coming back. Once it's cut, so they're no longer sanctified, but of course the sanctity that was there before, yesterday, is still there today. What do we need to do? We need to redeem that in the normal way we redeem sanctified items. And now we can use it. But without redemption, how does Ulla come and say you don't even need to redeem them? You determined at the beginning that it was going to be up till a certain point, Ulla says. As soon as you get to that point, you cut them. There's no sanctity. Rav Hamnuna says, there's no way you could say such a thing. And here's his proof. What if a man is betrothing a woman? Now, the word for betrothal is kiddushin, from the lashon of kiddusha, sanctity. So marriage, they're saying, is basically like a sanctification of the woman. So now, or the relationship. So now you can't say, listen, I'm going to betroth you today, but tomorrow we won't be betrothed. Now, does that work? Right? Mi nafka below get. Can she leave without getting a get? Of course not. And now we're going to make an analogy. Get is to kiddushin, as pidyon is to sanctification. And therefore, you can't, even if you determined a time from the beginning, in this timeline, okay, we're going to think a lot today in terms of timelines. There's this moment where you sanctified it, and then you say, but it will end at this point. It doesn't end, right? If you did that with a marriage, it doesn't end. You might say, I'm betrothing you today, but not for tomorrow. Well, if you want to not be betrothed tomorrow, you're going to have to give her a get. Likewise here, you're going to have to do redemption, even though you said it from the beginning. So that's Rav Hamnuna's comparison. And therefore, he questions Ulla. Rava brings an answer and basically says, Rava says to Rav Hamnuna, Mika medamet, kedushat damim, likdushat haguf. He says, wait a minute, you're comparing apples and oranges. Kiddushin is not a fair comparison to our case. Kiddushin, of course, can't be undone without a get. Why is that? Because Kiddushin is a higher sanctity. Higher sanctity means harder to get rid of. Lower sanctity, easier to get rid of. Now, what's the higher sanctity, lower sanctity? This is a term we're going to see many times, especially when we get to zvachim and sacrifices. There's an item that you can sanctify that has what we call kedushat haguf, which means kedusha in its body. You could call it inherent kedusha, which is if I take an animal and sanctify it to the temple, that means I'm bringing this animal as a sacrifice. We've seen that many times, right? Harei zo olah. I say, this animal will be an olah. We mentioned Tamura the other day in passing, so I'll go back to Tamura right now. What is Tamura? Let's say I change my mind. I don't want to use this animal. I want to use a different animal. So I say instead of this animal, I'm using this animal. I can't do that. Now, in normal sanctification, I can redeem it onto a coin. I can redeem it onto another animal if I want with the same value. In laws of sacrifice, if I sanctify this animal to the temple, I can't undo the sanctity, even by redemption. Okay, it's a much more serious kind of sanctity. And, right, maybe there are situations where I could redeem it. If the animal gets a blemish, then I can. But until it's blemished, it's basically sanctified for the temple. It's supposed to be sacrificed. So it's true that there is a way to redeem it, but it's more difficult. So now that is inherent sanctity. That's an animal that I dedicated to the temple. If I dedicate my table to the temple, then either I can bring my table or I can redeem it onto a coin, take the money, onto coins, money, take the money to the temple. And what I really meant generally is, and I could even sanctify an animal in that way. I could say the value of this animal is going to the temple. Damim means money, value. I've sanctified it for its value. That's a lot of the times where I sanctify items. I sanctify them for their value, then the value goes to the temple. That is obviously much easier to redeem because that's the whole idea. The value of this, it means this isn't actually sanctified. Now it is until I take money in its place. As soon as I take money in its place, the money has sanctity. The sanctity is removed from the item. It's a much easier process because it's a much less severe sanctity. So comes Rava and he says, our Mishna, when I said these nitiot will be sanctified until they're cut, I meant the value of them, right? I wasn't going to bring them. Nobody needs these nitiot specifically in the temple. I was going to bring their value. That's kedushat damim. The kiddushin is kedushat haguf because it's the woman herself. It's not her value. It's she herself. So therefore, he says, how can you compare kedushat damim to kedushat haguf? And he continues to say, kedushat damim paka b'chdi. You could have a case if you're going to do this timeline. Now, generally, kedushat damim isn't just removed with a snap of a finger. You have to redeem it onto money. But if I said this will be sanctified until such point, and then from that point on, it won't be, so that can be removed from my declaration at the beginning, can say, oh yeah, and that's going to basically answer Ulla. In this case, this was kedushat damim. So I said, at a certain point, it won't be sanctified anymore, so from that point, it won't be sanctified. But kedushat haguf lo paka b'chdi. When it comes to marriage, you can't determine a time from the beginning and say, oh, from this point on, you won't be sanctified to me, or you won't be betrothed to me. So basically, Rav Hamnuna, I want to keep going back to the structure because it's going to get a little bit confusing where we're going. So Rav Hamnuna questioned Ulla, Rava answered the question and said, don't make that comparison. Yeah, kedushat damim could just be removed like that. You wouldn't need pidyon. Now, Rava, and this is important to understand, made a certain assumption. His assumption was that kedushat damim can be removed easily. Kedushat haguf, and that's going to be the part we're going to focus on, cannot be removed very easily, right? It can't just, with a setting of time in the beginning, kedushat haguf can't be removed. That specific issue, Abaye is going to have a problem with, okay? So this doesn't really take us back to, right? It kind of ruins the comparison that Rava did to question Rav Hamnuna and the distinction. He distinguished between kedushat damim and kedushat haguf, and Abaye wants to say, actually go even farther. Until now, we thought kedushat haguf for sure can't be removed, and that's what Rav Hamnuna was talking about. Kedushat damim could be. Comes Abaye and he says, Abaye, kedushat haguf lo paka b'chdi. He says, why are you even assuming you wanted to distinguish kedushat damim and kedushat haguf? Even kedushat haguf can be removed by determining a time at the beginning. How so? Hatanya, doesn't it say in a braita, Shiur ze ola kol 30 yom, ulachar 30 yom shlamim. This shiur I will bring, this animal, as a korban ola, burnt offering. Remember, burnt offering is the highest level of sanctity. It's called kodshe kodshim, because the entire thing gets burnt. Nobody eats the meat. So this shiur will be a korban ola for the next 30 days. Ulachar 30 yom, but if I don't sacrifice it in the first 30 days, these upcoming 30 days, shlamim, then I'm going to use it as a korban shlamim, which is a lighter kedusha called kodshim kalim, lighter level kedusha, which can be eaten, the meat can be eaten by the owners. Now, what do you see here? So I basically determined in time that it's going to be one level of sanctity, and then after that, the sanctity of ola will be removed, and the sanctity of shlamim will kick in. So it's not removing sanctity entirely, but it is removing us more high-level sanctity and turning it into a lower-level sanctity, which basically is removal of sanctity. And the ola is no longer upon it. What does the halacha say in that braita? Kol 30 yom ola, la'achar 30 yom shlamim. So if you use it for the first 30 days, you bring it as a sacrifice, you'll have to use it as an ola. After those 30 days, be a shlamim. So what do you see here? Amai. According to you, why should this work? Kedushat damim ninu upaka b'chdi. What do you see here? First of all, the animal designated as a korban is obviously kedushat haguf, because the animal is sanctified inherently. And what do you see? The removal of sanctity without any sort of redemption. So that's, again, where are we here? We're not really going back to Rav Hamnuna. Rav Hamnuna asked this question on Ulla. Rava answered the question, comes Abaye and says, Rava, your answer has a problem inherently in your answer. that you made this distinction, and this distinction actually doesn't exist. It actually also goes against what Ulla said ultimately, because Ulla was trying to go the other extreme, that none of them can be removed, and he's saying all of them can be removed, whereas Rava made this distinction. Kedushat haguf can be, Kedushat damim can be, value, yes, but Kedushat haguf, inherent Kedusha, can't. Okay? Abaye is basically saying everything can be removed, and look at this braita. To which he says, to which the Gemara rejects Abaye's question by saying simply, why are you assuming that you meant this animal will be sanctified inherently, and I'm going to use this animal as a sacrifice? No, it could be that the person said the value of this animal, and then the case with the animal is very simply kedushat damim, and then Abaye, you have no question, because you could say, Rava will say, that's kedushat damim, that's just the value is sanctified. Kedushat haguf, you wouldn't be able to just remove the sanctity. Sounds like a good answer, but the Gemara is going to reject it right away, because there's a second part of that braita. Look at the latter part of the braita. Okay, by the way, the study guide today will help you organize this. I made a bunch of charts that will help you. Okay. Look at the end of that braita. Okay, this is similar and different from the first case. The order is the same, ola shlamim, in terms of the way what the person said. In the first case, he said it will be ola for 30 days, and then it'll be shlamim for 30 days. So in this case, he mentions ola first, but he jumps ahead in time. So it's flipped here in terms of the order of the way he speaks is the same, ola shlamim, but the content of what he's saying about each is flipped. So what does he say here? It's a little bit of a confusing language, and in the end, they're going to reread this language, and you can see what motivated them to reread it, because it's a bit of a strange language to say it like this. First, you started with the next 30 days. You said, after 30 days, it'll be an ola. Ume'achshav shlamim. Okay, so in simpler terms, you would have just said, now it's shlamim for the first 30 days, and for the next 30 days, it'll be ola. That would have been a little more simpler. It would have been the exact case as before, but the reverse. It goes from shlamim to ola rather than ola to shlamim. Why would each be different? Well, one is severe sanctity to lower sanctity, right? Higher level sanctity to lower level. And this is lower level to higher level. Now, again, the halacha is the same. The first 30 days, it'll be shlamim, and the next 30 days, it will be an ola. So now they say, right? But again, the language is a little different. What he's saying is, after 30 days, it'll be ola, but from now until that point, it will be a shlam. So now, the whole question is going to be, why do we need these two parts? Right, first of all, okay, and we'll read this inside in a minute, but I'll already say it so you have it in your head. If from ola to shlamim, which is high level, to lower level, you don't need anything to change the sanctity, then obviously from lower level sanctity to higher level sanctity, you shouldn't need anything. To go up is always easier, right? That you have less to remove. So of course you don't need pidyon if you don't need it in the first case. So the two cases are really unnecessary. You just need one case. You could have said the first case, you would have been able to infer the second case very easily. To which the Gemara says, what are we trying to prove? Abaye said this is kedushat haguf. To which the Gemara answered, which was his question on Rava. Here you see kedushat haguf. You don't need any method to remove it. To which the Gemara said, no, maybe this isn't kedushat haguf. Maybe it's just kedushat damim, where you said the value of the animal and not the animal itself will be a sacrifice. So iyamar pishlama. So now comes the Gemara to say, no, it's clearly kedushat haguf. How do we know? Iyamar pishlama. If you say it like this, it's going to make a lot of sense, which is the first option. And then they're going to basically say by process of elimination, it must be this, because the other way makes no sense. So what makes a lot of sense? To say, why do we need two different cases? Because one is coming to tell you it's sanctity where you sanctify just the value. And the other is coming to teach you, and even if you sanctify the animal itself, even kedushat haguf, even if it had inherent sanctity, you still don't need redemption, which then would go and support what Abaye said from the beginning. And now moving to Amud Bet, and that's what they're going to explain now. Hainu de itzrichle. This is a method used very often in the Gemara, and I'll explain it in a minute. Hainu de itzrichle latana lemitne tarte. That's why the Tana needed two cases to teach you. Also kedushat haguf, also kedushat damim. What if you only have one case? Why couldn't you just say that there has one case and it's teaching you inherent kedusha, doesn't need any sort of redemption, right? You can switch from ola to shlamim without a problem. And from there, we'd assume also kedushat damim. The reason is because if you only have one case, now obviously they could have said kedushat haguf, but they don't say that, okay? So they say, if we only have one case, what would you have thought? You could say there's one case. Let's just assume that case is only value. The value of it is sanctified. The fact that you have two now teaches you, well, you can't say they're both coming to teach you that because there's no need for the second case. And therefore, two means there's no way out. You can't say it's all the value. It must be one value, one inherent kedusha. So that's what they're saying there. That's why they need to tell you two cases. You might have thought that if the animal is actually sanctified, inherent kedusha, it's supposed to be sacrificed, and once it was supposed to be sacrificed in ola, you can't just move it to a shlamim, even though you declared so at the beginning. You might have thought that, and you might have said then, but kedusha damim pacha b'chti, it would only work if you had said the value of this animal and not the animal itself, so that you don't mistakenly think that they brought two cases. Now, it's true the two cases are different, but the point is they gave you two different cases because they weren't going to say the same case twice. And the point of bringing you two cases that are basically the same halacha is to teach you this would apply whether you sanctified it for its value or whether you sanctified it itself, the animal, inherent kedusha haguf. So that is a good way to explain the braita. But if you wanted the way you wanted to explain it when you questioned Abaye, if you wanted to say they're both when it's just the value, and then it teaches us nothing about kedusha haguf. Remember, Abaye was trying to question Rava and say, you distinguish kedusha haguf, kedusha damim, and you said, oh, if it's value, kedusha will just be removed easily. If it's inherent kedusha, you can't just remove it. Abaye basically rejects that by reading the braita as kedusha damim and kedusha haguf both can be removed without doing anything. So the Gemara says, well, if you wanted to say, like we questioned Abaye, that they're both kedusha damim and kedusha haguf, you can't just remove very easily. This is what we already explained. Why would you need both cases? When we go from ola to shlamim, and it's a more severe sanctity to a less severe sanctity, and it doesn't need any sort of redemption in between, you certainly wouldn't need to say that if I first said it was a shlamim and then it was going to turn into an ola, of course I wouldn't need any sort of redemption in the middle. So that second case would be totally unnecessary if they're both kedusha damim. Therefore, it must be one is kedusha damim, one is kedusha haguf. Obviously, in our logic, we would say, well, if it was one was kedusha damim, one was kedusha haguf, they should have specified that, which is obviously the way we would look at this. It seems a little weird. Why didn't they just say kedusha haguf, kedusha damim? But this is often, again, this is the method used by the Amoraim when they're trying to understand the Mishnah and something doesn't make sense. They say it must be there's something under the surface here that's more than what appears to the eye, and that's their method of logic. So again, just to review before we move on, I wanted to be clear. We started with Ulla and Bar Pada, two explanations of the Mishnah, what it means and then pidyon, and what happens at that timeline when yitzitzu. Do they need pidyon? Do they not need pidyon? Ulla had said they don't need any sort of redemption. Bar Pada thinks they do. Rav Hamnuna questioned that from Kiddushin. Rava said, don't question from Kiddushin. Those are two different types of sanctities, two different levels. Kedusha damim value can just be removed. Kedusha haguf can't be just removed. Abaye and questioned Rava and said, who says kedusha haguf can't be removed? Look at this braita. This braita proves, which we just went through a whole process to really prove it after the Gemara tried to reject his reasoning and said it's clear from the two sections of this braita that one must be referring to kedusha haguf, one to kedusha damim, and that proves kedusha damim can even be removed without anything. Now that we have Abaye, which actually in the end, even though he wasn't coming to do this, he was coming to question Rava's answer, he actually ends up supporting Ulla's explanation, which is why the next line of the Gemara is, once we have this braita, lematavi tiyuvta de Bar Pada, tamar lo paka kedusha bichti. What did Bar Pada say? He said even in kedusha damim, the kedusha isn't removed. So can't we use this braita with the shlamim and the ola and the shlamim? Can't that disprove Bar Pada? Right? We now have a braita that seems to show that if you set a time from the beginning, in 30 days, this will change from an ola to a shlamim without any sort of redemption, and from a shlamim to an ola, and we just proved even if it's inherent sanctity, or the more so if it's only kedusha damim, this should reject Bar Pada, right? This braita should stand as a question. Amar Rav Papa, comes Rav Papa with an answer, and this is going to be an answer that doesn't really, doesn't fully resolve the issue. We'll talk about in a minute what's missing from Rav Papa. Some of the commentaries try to fill in what's missing here, but he's basically going to explain the second part of the braita as if the first part doesn't question it. Really, the first part questions it just as well, okay, which is a little bit strange, but Amar Lecha Bar Pada, let's read it and then we'll see. Hachi Kamar, he changes the reading of the second part. And this is going to a little bit address that issue of the very strange order, right? Why did it start with La'achar Shloshim Yom, it will be an Ola, and Me'achshav Shlamim, okay? Some people say that he actually changes the words and uses like a type of Chisur and Mechasre, it's missing words and this is how it should read. Some people say he's really just interpreting it a little bit differently. You'll see that it becomes a very different interpretation, whether he actually has to change the words or doesn't, reads it into the words. Anyway, that's a side point. Hachi Kamra, this is the way he reads it. Im lo amar me'achshav shlamim. Okay, instead of saying, right, now we understand why they started with, if you said la'achar shloshim yom ola, without specifying that me'achshav it shlamim, okay, so it's the opposite of what it said, or at least part of it is opposite. If you didn't say, and now it'll be a shlamim, but you just said la'achar shloshim yom ola have, then basically what it's saying is totally different topic then. Again, this is just the second part of the braita. We have to really still explain the first part, which the Gemara doesn't deal with. But the second part of the braita is basically saying, if you want to say this animal will be sanctified only in 30 days, as an ola, it doesn't matter, it could be a shlamim also, and you didn't say for the first 30 days it will be a shlamim, you just didn't say anything about the first 30 days, well, that would work. It will be an ola. Midi dahave, just like, ha'omer li ishad kadshili la'achar shloshim yom, de mekudeshet. A man betroths a woman and says, gives her a ring, okay, or money, betrothed with money, gives her the money. Well, I'll use the money example because that's what they're using here. Gives her, a pile of cash and says, you are betrothed to me in 30 days with this money. She takes the money. She spends the money. The money is gone when day number 30 comes. It doesn't matter. She is betrothed because he said the betrothal will take place in 30 days. Likewise, I'm saying this animal will be sanctified in 30 days. I can do that. Okay, that's what he's trying to say. Now, what about the first part? The first part, right? So basically what it's saying is this has nothing to do with Kedusha running out at a certain point, because that's not the case. It's not a case where we went from Shlamim to Ola. It's a case where I was just predetermining, I was saying, at some future date, this will be a Korban Ola. So before we go into some questions the Gemara has on this, I want to just look at the Ram for a minute. He addresses two things. First, he says, so what about the Reisha? The Reisha said, if you say it's Ola for 30 days, and then you say it's Shlamim after that, it switches from Ola to Shlamim without any sort of intervention. To which the Ran, if you look at the end of the second line in the Ran here at the top of the page, the Reisha stays as it is. And first of all, it's only value. And Bar Pada will say, oh, it didn't say so, but obviously there was redemption there. Okay, and that's what you would have to say. And then you wouldn't say there's Kedushat haguf. You would go back saying Kedushat haguf this, right? Or maybe you can't even redeem it if it's Kedushat haguf, I guess. And you would have to have redeemed it, and you have to add that. Otherwise, this really doesn't make sense. And the other thing I wanted to point out in the Ran is if you skip down another 3 lines, he says, Kamash balan tarte. This reading of the second part of the braita teaches you 2 things. The first is really what we said. And you can say it'll be Ola in 30 days. That works. Below tema, and don't say kevan de lo kadosh hashta, lo kadosh nami lachashata. You can't say because it's not sanctified right now, so it won't apply in 30 days. You can sanctify an item in this kind of way. And then he says, "V'kamash malanami." I'm skipping a line or 2. The beginning of the line is kamash malanami. It teaches you an additional thing. It's only because you didn't say me'achshav shlamim. But heichad amar me'achshav shlamim lo havi la'achar shloshim yom ola. Okay? In other words, and it's teaching you kedushat haguf lo paka bechdi, that if you said it was shlamim from now, and then it will be ola in 30 days, that doesn't work. That's what it's trying to tell you also. You can't do that because you can't just remove kedusha like that. Okay, that's the way the Ran understands it. Tosfot brings two different possibilities of another way to understand why the ratio is not a problem, because theoretically, the ratio really does seem to imply, with the simple reading, is you can move from Ola to Shlamim, and that's weird. How could you do that without anything? And why isn't that a question on Bar Pada? So I'm leaving it as an open question. Again, the Ran said, you must have redeemed it. And now he also said, the fact that you didn't say Ma'achshav, had you said Ma'achshav, it actually would have continued to be sanctified. Anyway, we're going to leave that as a bit of an open question, which we did find some possibility, know that there are other possibilities to answer that. So again, what did we do? Okay, I'm just going to review again. Rav Hamnuna questioned Ulla. How could you say Kedusha is just removed entirely, right? It's just like Kiddushin. Came the Gemara, Rava, and said, it's not like Kiddushin. Kiddushin is Kedusha haguf. That can't be removed easily, but if you set a time for Kedusha damim, it could work. Came Abaye and he said, even for Kedusha haguf, it should work. I don't know why you made this distinction. Once Abaye proves that from this braita, we use the braita to question Bar Pada, to which Rav Papa comes up with some other explanation of the braita. To which the Gemara questions a little bit. Pshita. Why do you even need to tell me this? Of course, if I give some future time for sanctity to apply, it should work, right? Especially since we see by Kiddushin it works, so of course it should work by the animal as well. To which the Gemara says, well, this is the chidush. Lo tzricha dehadarbe. What they want to tell you is, what if I change my mind on day number 15? So I said in 30 days this will be sanctified, and on day number 15 I said, you know what, I don't really want this animal to be sanctified. You might have thought, I can do that because it hasn't yet kicked in. As long as the animal's not yet sanctified, maybe I can stop it from happening. That's what the braita is telling you I can't. If I say la'achar shloshim yom, it's basically sanctified from, it sanctified from now to the extent that it's not really sanctified right now, but I can't change my mind. So now they say, okay, well, let's go back to this comparison with Kiddushin. By Kiddushin, there's a debate. If a man betroths a woman and says, after 30 days, you'll be betrothed, she has to agree, by the way, to Kiddushin. We've learned this before. She has to say, I want to get married. What if she said, I want to get married on day number 1, when he said in 30 days, and then on day number 15, she changes her mind. Can she change her mind or not? There's a machloket amoraim about this. So, if you say here, you can't change your mind about the sanctity, well, that works very well. If you say the same thing about Kiddushin, that she can't change her mind. And she's basically betrothed him, even though right now, and when the 30-day kicks in, and the moment the Kiddushin kicks in, she's actually not interested in it. Since she agreed at the beginning, that's considered that she agreed. But if you hold by Kiddushin, she can change her mind, then theoretically you should hold the same thing when it comes to this animal. So how are you going to explain it? To which they say, again, this is to say, the whole unique interpretation of this braita is to teach you that you can't change your mind if you, right? Again, this is Rav Papa's reading according to Bar Pada. If you said in 30 days, the sanctity will kick in, and you changed your mind in the middle before the 30 days, before the 30-day deadline comes, you can't change your mind. That animal is sanctified. Now, if you hold by Kiddushin, she could change her mind. And if on day 30, she's decided, I don't want to marry him anymore, she's not betrothed, actually. She can go back. So why would it be any different? So now they're going to say, Afilu lamanda amal hatam chozeret hachashani. These cases, as we tried before to say they're different, before we actually said that's more strict because it's Kedusha haguf and this is Kedusha damim. Now we're going to do the reverse. We're going to say this is different. Da'amirato legavoa kim mesirato lahedyo. This is a famous line that comes up very often in laws of sacrifices or sanctification. If I say something is for gavoa, which means for God, for the temple, if I sanctify something to the temple, now, why is this similar to Kiddushin? Why is it a very good comparison? Because it's all with my words, right? This is what we talked about. Seder Nashim is all about words. Kiddushin, he says, it's true he gave her a ring or he gave her money, but the main thing is the words he says to express it. And he said this will take place in 30 days. That can be removed, okay? According to the one who says she can change her mind within 15 days, let's say, sometime within that 30-day period. But when I say something is sanctified to God, it's like kimesirato lahedyo. Even by just saying the words, this is sanctified, it's as if I gave it to somebody as a gift. It's as if it's already not mine. and I have no rights to it anymore. So if I said this animal will be sanctified in 30 days, I can't change my mind no matter what, forgetting about what I say about Kiddushin. Even if I say in Kiddushin, she could change her mind. I can't change my mind about this item because it's as if I did what we call a kinyan, as if I did an actual action and passed it on to somebody. Okay, it's as if it's already in the hands of the temple. It's not mine anymore to do anything with, even though the sanctity only kicks in 30 days. It's still not mine anymore because my statement that I expressed in words is already applied. Okay, so that's the difference between them. And that just answered a side question on Rav Papa, which is, what is this braita telling you? And in the end, that's what the braita is telling you. That not that it will be sanctified in 30 days. That we know, that would be obvious. It's telling you that not only will it be sanctified, but I can't even change my mind in between. So again, I'm going to do one last time. We started with Ulla and Bar Pada, Rav Hamnuna question. Rava answered. Abaye questioned Rava's answer, his distinction between Kedushat Dam and Kedushat haguf, said all of it really could just be, pak'ah, as you see in the braita. Then we said, well, if that's how you read the braita, that's going to be a question on Bar Pada, who said you need pidyon. And Abaye seems to show, this braita shows you don't need pidyon at all. To which Bar Pada explained that that's not what it's talking about. Again, Rav Papa explained for Bar Pada. That's not what it's talking about. And then explained what is it that braita is talking about, which then has nothing to do with our issue. And that's where we got to today. We're going to stop here because the next 3 lines are basically an introduction to a story. So it's really not, there's no content in it. We're just going to wait till we get to it tomorrow. We'll start the whole story. We're going to have a funny story where Rav Yomi falls asleep in the middle of a discussion and then all of a sudden wakes up and has what to say. There's a bunch of Talmudic stories that go along those lines about the rabbi falling asleep in class and, while everybody's talking, and then somehow manages to hear while he's sleeping what was going on. That will be for tomorrow. We will stop here for today. Have a great day, everyone.